Did you happen to see any new patterns or themes for running camp in the future from your summer camp experience this year? Hello, Camp Mavericks, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast brought to you by Ultra Camp and Camptivities. My name is Travis Allison. I'm a summer camp marketing and strategy consultant.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hudson. I am the founder and director of a place called Camp Highlight, a sleepaway camp for kids who have LGBTQ parents. It is routinely voted the best camp in the world.
And my name is Gabrielle Rell. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Boro. Camp Boro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for girls and gender minorities.
My name's Joe Richards. I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility, which is a traditional summer camp and part of the United Church of Canada's camping network. And we're located in Fingal, Ontario, about halfway between Detroit and Toronto.
Welcome to season 70 million, everybody. It's great to have you back. I think if we worked hard, we would say it's season 12.
Season 12.
I'm not so good at math on the
Season
go.
12, and that doesn't include the Camp Nation days.
No, our pre-podcast.
Pre-podcast.
Yeah, it's true. Anyway, it's so grateful to have the three of you here. Thank you very much for making time and for your spirit of sharing so much with everybody in the camp industry. I think you're a gift to this industry.
Aw.
Come on now.
I didn't know we'd be doing compliments at the top of the show. Okay.
No, just one way. I'm not looking for anything. We'll be fine. What I would like to say is that if you're a listener, then online reviews of the show help us. It just helps sort of give us a bit of social proof about the episode. We would love it if you went to ratethispodcast.com/camp and then click the ratings and reviews button. And there you can review the CampHacker podcasts. We do check them out. We use that as kind of our feedback mechanism. And it's, I guess, a bit of social proof. Today, as we come back to the first episode of the fall, we're going to talk about debriefing the summer for the three that ran camp and seeking some patterns in how summer camp has changed. Certainly, everyone that I have talked to has said that summer camp is different. I think for those who continually say that we're going to get back to what 2019 was, are wrong. I think we're not going to get there. I think we'll get a new normal, but it's not going to be that. So welcome to the three of you. We are thinking about things that we saw and things that happened to you. I'll start with a bit of an overview of some of the stuff that I saw from my position in my basement office this summer. I think that certainly friends, and I think we'll hear today, had a stressful summer. I don't know a camp director who didn't think that this was the most stressful summer they've ever had. I think that there are a lot of issues that surprised folks. Unfortunately, what's the best way to word this? I'm frustrated at the number of camps that didn't have COVID plans and that affected their camps, that came into the summer with no plan as to what would happen. And then we saw people asking for help. I'm the camp director and I'm sick with COVID and we don't have a plan. A third of my staff is out with COVID and we don't have a plan. And I find that frustrating. I think people who listen to this podcast are not those people. I think we've talked a lot last season about what we need to be prepared for. And I think we'll have to continue to be super aware of what the issues are, including the fact that COVID's going to be a factor for the known future. And so I hope that some of the lessons that folks can take away from this include that we need to be prepared for stuff, and we need to have plans. And yeah, so there's lots of different parts to that. But since I was working in my basement office this summer, truthfully, I was mostly just on a reclining chair recovering from a broken collarbone all summer. But I wasn't directing camp. So Gab, what for you is some of the just kind of the highlights of what happened at camp that you think are lessons you will take away?
Well, I agree. Most people that I spoke to also had quite a difficult summer. I'd like to go off of my frustration. I'm going to share my frustration.
Please.
My frustration is that when we're talking about plans, one, we did have plans, and thank goodness, but also we would not have made it without these plans, and it's not sustainable. Like, these plans that we have aren't sustainable. I had to, get almost, I think it was about 10 past leadership team members to commit to this summer to help support us. It's just not a sustainable model, and we're relooking at what we can do. I think what I'm frustrated with is maybe the idea, not from the people that are on camps themselves, but maybe the people that are supporting. So the executive directors that aren't physically on camp, or the board members, or even maybe some of the associations that their mentality is, we're back to quote unquote typical normal, whatever you want to call it, and not looking at the actual impact that this is happening. So I would say that our camp this summer maybe survived the summer, and I think we protected a large majority of our staff and our leadership team by having this contingency plan of having extra leadership team members come in throughout the summer. So that allows us to build for next year, which feels really great. We're not losing our staff, we're not losing our leadership team. But I feel like there's this disconnect from people that aren't necessarily, not everybody, but the ones that are actually working at camp. I'm seeing one thing from, being boots on the ground within my organization versus people that aren't there. And I'm very worried, and I've said this before we went into this summer, I'm very worried about the mental wellness of our camp leaders. That is everywhere from CITs all the way to our camp directors. And again, this year, and I'm not somebody that's extremely social, I have a very small network of people that I spend time with that are from the camp community. And still within that, my small circle, there's people that need to take a leave of absence. And I'm really supportive, and I'm very happy that they're doing that. I think it's necessary. That sort of disconnect is really frustrating to me. And it's going to have it is the signs of a long-term impact is there. And I'm worried about our industry. And people that care about kids and staff, and not having the right people there, because they can't sustain this. It's been 3 years of doing this,
all these big hearts with no money,
and no support, and no contingency plan. And well, let's just pack camp, and let's try to find as many staff members as possible, and let's just go, oh, our staff are sick, well, we're not going to make any adjustments. We're going to just put that pressure on the staff members who are 17, 18, 19 years old. They're not coming back, or their experience isn't positive. They're not going to become your next leadership team members, the next camp directors. This peeves me off, if I'm allowed to say that on CampHacker.
Yes, you're allowed to say peeves. You could say piss if you want.
It pisses me off. There we go.
You could say piss, arse, any of those things.
Didn't realize. There you go.
Any words that are legal on television, we can say here.
Okay, good.
Well, we've said other words, to be honest.
Depends what channel,
I was going to say I watch different channels, so.
How about for you, Joe? What was kind of a summer overview for you?
Our summer overview here at Pierce Williams is that we had a fairly successful summer in terms of COVID and staffing, and nice. I certainly didn't experience the same level of stress as other camping professionals I've spoken to. And I wonder, Gabs, if this is a symptom of people not doing their own self-care or taking care. It's a difficult summer. We should base no full future plans on the summer of 2022, right? We need to be very careful not to change too much, but also to change just enough. And my theory with some of the stress that our camping colleagues have experienced is that they sometimes don't take their own well-being as right in terms of they want to protect others and help others, but they don't give themselves that same latitude. And so here at Pierce Williams, we were understaffed for a couple of things. We had some staff leave with COVID. We had no campers leave camp with COVID. So that was great. It helps to be a week-long camp because then they just leave on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We did get some parents who sent us notes the following week saying, hey, my kid tested positive for COVID, but really there's nothing in our plan that we would do differently once we learned that, right? It's just, we keep going and monitor for symptoms. We certainly my experience this summer is we were much quicker to let campers go who were behaving badly.
Okay.
Because we also understood that our staff aren't resilient enough to deal with those behaviors over the long term. So rather than try and work that out with the camper for 2 or 3 days, we're just like, great, see you later. We also, the expectations we put on staff, one of the patterns I noticed was staff feeling like the expectations were unattainable. And I said this to them, and I said this, I've said this to people. I said, well, generations of people have done this before you. So where are we at, right? Like, what is different about this experience? And is it just that you've spent 2 summers away from camp? Or is there something that is technically different about your makeup that makes this harder for you?
I'm watching everybody say, I don't agree with, I'm glad you're asking questions, Joe. I don't agree with the premise of the questions. When you're a counselor, when I was a counselor, the job was 10% of what it is today. So of course it was easier for generations. It was easier. Camp was much more common. We grew up at camps that you and I grew up at camp. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but you and I grew up at camps that were pretty monosocial. And when I was a kid, I was the only kid at camp on meds. Like, no kids were on meds but me for allergies. And that is not the case. I don't know what, from some camps, it's 1/2 or 2/3 of kids are on some form of medication. And that alone is a huge indication of how society has changed. So my challenge is, I applaud you for asking the questions, Joe, but my challenge is that comparing it to the past isn't valid. Because we've talked for the last 3 or 4 years about changes. Before COVID, we were talking about how society had changed and the expectations on young adults had changed. So I just don't want to let that go without saying that I don't think you're right.
I understand it's not a popular opinion. And I understand that a lot of people say that it's not valid, or think that it's not valid. And that's your experience. What I'm getting at is the fact that, do we think it is completely different today than it was 15 years ago? Do we think it's completely different than it was?
Yes.
Yes.
And why? And why?
I'm ready to go. I can
You
tell you why.
You're a horse and there's a gate and you're like, open the gate.
Yeah.
Go,
So
Chris, the gate is open. Do it.
Listen, I have had frustrations with staff this summer, and it was a real turning point for Camp Highlight, and it was a turning point for me as a camp professional. I've been doing this for a long time, and yes, I was a counselor for 20-something years before I decided, let me start my own camp, right? Like, so one can argue that I'm really good at camp counseling. Like, I have been in and around it. So the thing is that, like, the thing it is, Joe, that today's generation is just markedly different from the generations before. Perhaps that's always true, but that's neither here nor there. The thing is like, yes, that makes the job different than it was 15 years ago. You just think about the way that we run camps today versus the way they were run 20 years ago. From, like Travis had mentioned, like the way that kids are being medicated, right? And so that's happening practically, but also all the thoughts and feelings and ideas that surround that. On top of that, the behaviors that we tolerate is different than it was 20 years ago. On top of that, the populations of camps are changing. So, and the other thing is about like what I've discovered with Generation Z is that because of the way that they grew up, this is my theory, because of the way that they grew up, because of their access to different treatment modalities, because of the increased attention on mental health when they were in middle school and younger, they have grown up expecting that the spaces that they enter treat them a certain way, or rather, they treat the spaces they enter as if it was a treatment center. Like they fully expect to have their emotions and their sensitivities catered to. So you throw that all in a pot, and then we try and run camp. And the question becomes like, well, how do we run a successful camp given these are the people working with the children? I can't tell you how many times, Joe, I got right to the line of asking the question and saying the thing that you just said. I can't tell you how many times I would start to say to counselors, well, I did this. Yeah, I did it 20 years ago. I did it 20 years ago. Like, as Travis mentioned, I had like 1 or 2 kids who went to go get meds, or 1 or 2 kids who had IEPs or specific interventions that we had to think about. Now, all the kids have special handling instructions, and I'm handing that down to young people who have to juggle all that. So yeah, I was a stellar camp counselor in the 90s when I didn't have to think of all that. Would I have been as successful if in my cabin of 8, I had 7 who had special handling instructions? Would I have been as successful if I had grown up with the message, and I judge it not, with the message that I should center my feelings and my thoughts and expectations in every context? Who's to say? But the point is that this generation, they're here now, and the answer can't be, well, we did it before you got here, so I don't know what the problem is with you. Like, it is a different playing field. Nobody on this call has the experience of working at a camp today as a frontline staff. And that it was drilled home to me so much today. Like, as I was watching these young people who are a full 2 generations behind me deal with children who are 3 generations behind me, it blew my mind. I was like, wow, I'm old now. I'm old. I don't know how to interact. And I'll just finish up this soapbox diatribe. I think about, one of the trainings I do is about like how to make change in organizations. We talk about skill, will, and hill. Like, what are the difficulties? Like, is it that your staff skill, they don't have the skills to do what you ask them to do? Will, they're not motivated? Or hill, they have to overcome significant obstacles that are in the way. And the question that I keep asking is like, am I the hill? Am I the hill? Am I the one who refuses to get on TikTok and communicate and market in that way? Am I the one who refuses to engage and indulge them around talking about their feelings ad nauseum? I don't want to be the hill in my own organization. So I would say, like, one of the trends I'm seeing, or I speak to other camp directors, it's really figuring out how to work with these young people who are working with our young people.
All of that is valid, and I take nothing away from any of it.
However,
no, however,
okay.
no, but,
it sounded like it was coming.
No, anything. I think that like, the summer of 1996 opened my eyes to the future of camping, because when I directed Stevenson Children's Camp, and we had 96 kids, and 70 of them were on some sort of medication, and they're all come with problems, right? You're well ahead of the curve as to where we are now, 20 years later. And what I struggle with is not saying that thing out loud or asking that question. And I don't ask it of 16-year-olds. I ask it of 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds to get them to think, would be the hope. What I'm afraid of is, what does the future hold for people who are not resilient enough to deal with what we have to deal with today?
Yep.
Because the fear that I have isn't that I don't believe they're exactly like me. And I'm not saying that counseling in 1991 is anything similar to counseling in 2000. And I am saying that they are similar. They're the same thing, but I think the resiliency factor, I sat through a commencement on Tuesday night. My daughter graduated high school, and the teachers were, the teachers and speakers were like, we have raised you and you are the most resilient generation after these 2 years. And I'm sitting in the crowd being like, you have not worked with these people at summer camp, because we need to put a bunch of safeties, and we did safeties in place to get people through. I think I asked the question more so that I can learn what we need to do different, right? And if it's 15-minute breaks 4 times a day, right, to give people time to reset, but also to challenge, because there's some people who they treat camp, and I'm not sure if you have people like this at your camps, they treat camp as their personal therapy location as staff. And I'm like,
absolutely.
And one of the things, Chris, that I'm very adamant from the get-go in staff training is that is not what we are. You need to understand that our focus is on giving campers an amazing summer camp experience. And if you have challenges as a staff person, you can deal with some of those, but we are not spending 5 hours a week on your therapy with your friends. It just doesn't, that's not what parents are paying for.
But let me ask you a question, Joe.
Yeah.
But what if that's what this generation requires? What does that mean for us as professionals? Like,
it means that we need to have camps with older campers.
I'm saying all this without judgment, right? If the young people today, when we all go out, back into the trenches trying to find staff for our camps, when we all go out in all the interviews, if that comes up in every single one, everyone says, listen, I need significant breaks. I need time to talk about my feelings. And they all say that. Do we close down or do we adjust? Like, what are we holding on to? Why can't we adjust to this?
I think that's what I was talking about, Chris, at the beginning. I think that's what I'm talking about maybe some people from the outside, or I think what I'm saying personally, I need time to reflect, to bleeping figure out how to best run camp and have to rethink things. And I feel I've been so privileged to be part of not one, but 2 podcasts, learn from brilliant people, sitting down with all of you, once every or twice every other week, go to conferences. I'm in a place in my life where I'm saying I need to go back to a drawing board because I'm I don't recognize the ground I'm walking on right now. And I need to listen. And I'll bring in just sort of 2 points. One, as many people know, I work with my family, work with, my father is our carpenter maintenance guy, and Jackie's my teammate as a co-director. And I'd have to say that, and this has nothing to do with her being my mother, but from somebody from a distance, she's somebody that has always been able to adapt from generation to generation. And I recognize in myself, I have a little bit of I recognize in me, and it's work that I'm doing with my therapist. She's amazing. I do have ego. I do have pride. And sometimes I'm like, this is how I bleeping have done it in the past. I know how to do things. Jackie she carries none of that on her. She never has that. She genuinely is interested in what people have to say. She marinates on things, and then she shifts things, even if she's been doing it for 30 years, and she knows that what works. And I'm trying to embody that sort of mentality. And I am scared right now because my intuition, I used to know how to handle certain kids, and I used to know my experience and my intuition really guided me. Right now, I feel like a fish out of water, and I'm trying to carve out time in my space to go back to school, education, conferences, whoever, research. I don't know. I'm working on it. But I personally need time to reevaluate because it's not working. And second, camp wasn't a safe space for me when I was growing up. There was no space for me to talk about my sexuality. There was no space for me to express how I felt about past traumas. I had to lock a lot of stuff up. I had to, that was part of the generation. I grew up at an all girls camp where we never spoke about queer, trans, non-binary individuals. We didn't necessarily even have the language at certain points, I think, but but this wasn't a space for me to be myself, my authentic self, as Worrell likes to proclaim. And we're working on that right now. And that comes with the whole person, the whole camper, the whole staff member. On top of it, there, just before our podcast, we jokingly said, well, we're doing this, and it doesn't matter because the world's going to end anyways. There's a little joke of the environment going to crap, or finances, is there security for our children financially? This is stuff that they have immediate access to. So I will say personally, I do not feel equipped to manage the way I have managed in the past, but I do feel like I know that I have to create space to try to understand, and I don't know how to go about it. But that brings me back to my first point of people that are supporting our camp professionals. That what frustrates me is it feels like a form of gaslighting, saying just because you don't have to wear a mask in a grocery store or at a restaurant does not mean that we are facing normalcy anymore. And that's why I'm worried about our industry, because I do have a beautiful network of people that do support me within my own organization, within the camp community, and I personally feel lost, which tells me that we do have to come together and have these type of conversations. And that's what I'm hearing from you, Joe, as well. You're trying to find those answers. I also don't have those answers, but I think that's one of the main reasons why there's many reasons why the summer was very tough, but this is one of the pillars of why it was tough for me this summer.
I hear you, and I hear the emotion in your voice, Gab, and I love you. So I think the reality is that what Pierce Williams needed this summer was a foundation to start from. And the role I played was the foundation, right? To make sure that people knew where we were going and what we were doing. And the new staff we have in place, because from the time we ran camp in 2019 to the time we ran camp now, we have all new staff in running camps. We had one staff member this summer who had been on staff in 2019. And so I played the foundation and let the management of younger staff fall to my 25-year-old camp director. And I don't micromanage that stuff, right? And they come to me in October and they ask for changes for next summer. And I need to remind myself that we are, and I've built into our whole identity at Pierce Williams, we are a camp that embraces change. And so as they requested a meeting with me and they went through this 2-hour-long presentation with slides and everything, and it involves hiring some more staff. And I was like, okay. But well before that, I had already made the choice 3 days before to be like, remember, you want to say yes. No matter what the presentation is, you want to say yes. And all I need to do is guide them into the big picture challenges of that. And I said, yeah, okay, that works great. The brass tacks you could have told me as the person who's in charge of this is this plan involves hiring 3 more people, right? And you're like, oh, 3 more people, I can do that. That's great. And part of their thing is that management, are we asking too much of these people in our current system? And so they're changing the system. And I was like, sure, more power to you.
We also want to thank our sponsor, CampTivities. You end the call and your mind is spinning. Who can do the scheduling for us? How will you find the time to train them? To explain all the nuance and detail to make sure your schedules come out the right way. The only people who know anything about scheduling at your camp already have a lot on their plates. Does this mean a lot of late nights each week to get the scheduling done? You quickly search Google for Camp Activity Schedule and you come across CampTivities, an activity scheduler for camps by camp people. As you click, you're already thinking, this would never work for my camp, but you begin to explore it anyways. They've got group scheduling, camper scheduling, batch scheduling. Ooh, this is interesting. Manual adjustments, elective scheduling, tons of customizable settings, and more than 50 reports that you can work with. You say to yourself, this might actually work for us and save us a lot of time. Think about your organizational continuity and stop relying on one person to make your summer schedules. We'd love to show you the next big thing in camp. Don't wait. Start the onboarding process now when you have the time. Visit camptivities.com to help set up a time to chat. Let us help you find a way to get away from your desk and back out into camp.
I think the other challenge, and what I'm hearing, the biggest challenge, I think, not the biggest, a big challenge that we have as an industry is that people still believe that they, right, us, so camp directors who are on the boots on the ground don't always treat themselves the way they want to treat their staff. And I think that that's where we see the burnout, and that's where we see a generation of people behind us missing as full-time camp people, right? Or that's where we see people do 2 or 3 years as full-time camp people and then want to get out. There was a discussion on the Facebook group maybe a month ago now about what did you do after you left camping? And I was like, that shouldn't be a question we have to ask, right? You should be able to sustainably do this job, but
Yeah.
it was fascinating.
I agree with that. And I'm somebody that is very militant about taking time off during the summer because I know it feeds me. I know it helps my staff. It really helps my staff because of my mood regulation from taking time off. Problems that are big problems tend to become smaller problems, tiny problems that I wasn't even noticing. They come to the forefront of my brain and I say, oh my gosh, I actually need to address this. It's very, very important. I was told by a camp professional that what our industry needs is camp directors to really put themselves first. I really work to role model for my staff that I take time off. I role model taking naps after lunch. This is something that I work very hard at. I was not able to take time off until 2.5 months. And I won't say it's time off. I will say it was a rest period. I took a day and a half to rest. And I think that that's why I said our summer wasn't a success. We were able to make it through. We were able to protect our staff and our leadership team members. And that's just my experience, with COVID, with mental wellness issues, with a kitchen that was learning to become a team. These are all things that compiled into I was not able to take that time off. And I do believe in rest, and I do believe in this. And I think that there's definitely certain people that will think that they need to be there, and you don't need to be there. And then but I do see a shift just within my organization. It wasn't like, oh, things aren't going to go well, or, oh, the place is going to burn down without me. I really physically couldn't leave. It wasn't possible. And, that's why we're reevaluating, and that's why I'm trying to rethink things, but it's tricky, yeah.
Chris,
sorry, go ahead, Travis.
Do you have a follow-up on Gab's thing, which you're welcome to? I would also love to hear, the highlight lessons, struggles and lessons, the struggles and lessons of highlight.
Sure. I mean,
I'm not asking you yourself.
In general, I am just, and this is something that I am chicken little when it comes to the camp industry, because I'm always like shouting to anyone who listens, we have about 20 to 25 years till this is not a thing anymore. And I think the staff crisis is, this conversation speaks to the staff crisis in our industry, is that one, and I've spoken to a lot of camp directors in the past couple of weeks, we're all a little flabbergasted, asking the same question Joe asked, like, listen, I did this, what's going on here? And the thing is that there's not a ready answer to that question. And it's freaking me out. And it's freaking a lot of people out, because as I look into, because also something else that we kind of touched on obliquely is that because of the struggles of the young people, the campers, and because the staff, the way that they acclimate, we burned a lot of staff this summer. That we had a lot of one and dones, people who are not going to come back because their experience was just literally too hard for what they were getting paid and for the time and energy they were putting in. And so as I prepare for the next season of hiring, I'm terrified, because I'm just like, it's happened once before. We came within one staff person of not opening, and now I'm afraid that's going to happen in 2023. Okay, so that's there. Everyone should run right now, run into the street, start screaming and throw your arms up, run back and forth. That's where we're at, people. That's it. Other things that, other things that come up for highlight this summer. This is something that happened, and we just rethought it. Joe, you'd mentioned sending kids home for behavior. We just sent kids home because they wanted to go. And that was really eye-opening. After 30 so years of doing this kind of thing, like me and the other co-director, we looked at each other and we said, why are we imprisoning these children? Kids came to us like, I really want to go home. I really miss home. I really go. And we like knee jerk. We're like, well, listen, we have this coming up on Friday. And if you just tough it out, if you stick it out. And it just seemed to run counter to the message that we're always giving the children, which is that like, the way that you feel is important. Adults will believe you when you talk about your inner world, and they will move to help you. And it just seemed to me like this was I won't say it was a no-brainer because it was really a journey to get here, but like recognizing that the young people, the campers, had their own internal sense of how much they could take was revolutionary. And it went both ways. Sometimes kids just needed to know that they had the option. And once I said, hey, listen, if you still feel this way after 2 activity periods, I will call your parents and we will have a conversation, right? And some kids were like, great, never came up again. Then other kids were like, someone wanted to go home with only 2 nights left. And, we were like, all right, sure. And that kid had a fantastic time and is still singing our praises because 5 days was enough for that kid. 5 days out of a week was enough. And they will come back. And isn't that the point? So that's a lesson that I learned, which is fascinating. It's just great to keep learning stuff and doing this after all this time. But that was something that I just wanted to share with people. Think about it. Think about kids going home. Why not? Go ahead. I mean, not for nothing. The parents didn't get a refund, but but the kid was happy. Which is the whole point.
Did the parents struggle with that?
No. Parents did not struggle at it. We said, listen, we did our best. And the way they presented it was like, our culture here is to believe kids when they speak. And this child says that, it's not they're not having fun. It's just that this living situation is too much for them right now.
Yeah.
They need to come home. And the parents were like, got it. No pushback.
We had the most sent home in my career, tallied up to send home this. It was mixed with our families. We had some families that were on board. We had other families that were absolutely against it. I think in part it's because they had their own plans. I think the bigger picture was that they also just want to get back to normalcy and they want their kid to be okay. And it's hard to face that even maybe at summer camp where it's supposed to be fun, that they're not okay. And we did have some difficulties with some of the refunds or non-refunds, simply because maybe parents wanted us to keep them longer than we were comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. But that's certainly something that we're looking at as well, and comfortable with sending kids home. But it was the most I've ever, in my entire career, I've never sent so many kids home, like accumulated into that one summer ever.
Well, that's an interesting spot to leave this discussion, but I feel like this discussion is going to be our theme in so many ways this year. So thank you to the three of you for sharing your experiences and your questions and your thoughts. By the way, if you... Chris did a whole 5-minute video on sending kids home on 5-Minute Fridays.
Sure did.
If you're interested and wish to be a subscriber, you can check out that video at gocamp.pro/5fmf. Yes, that's it.
Actually, just to interrupt you, I've done 2 videos on sending kids home. I previewed one here, and if you want to hear what I'd say for the other one, you just got to subscribe.
There you go.
You just got to subscribe. Thank
you for opening that loop, Chris. That's well done. I want to take a second and thank our sponsor, UltraCamp. Without sponsors like Camptivities and UltraCamp, we couldn't continue to increase the product production and all of the things that go into making CampHacker better every season. So we're grateful to them. For CampHacker listeners, UltraCamp has a way to increase your staff retention by staying in touch with the camp staff all year long. Download UltraCamp's staff communication calendar that includes pre-written prompts for free by visiting ultracampmanagement.com/camphacker. Do you remember why you chose to get into camp? UltraCamp knows it wasn't because you love paperwork. That's why they built a platform that streamlines managing each piece of your program all in one place. No more having to learn and remember several different platforms to run your camp. With UltraCamp, you can register and manage campers, generate and direct communication, organize schedules and activities, process payments and donations. UltraCamp's goal is to help their clients spend less time in the office and more time doing what they love. Want to know if UltraCamp is the right fit for you? They offer free customized demo sessions so you can see their software in action. Sign up at ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker. This means that we are ready for our tool of the week. Joe, do you mind going first with your tool of the week?
No, I do not. My
Excellent.
tool of the week. My tool of the week is a CO2 monitor, specifically the AirNet 4. It rings in at a pricey $325 Canadian, but is portable, and they sell a wall mount bracket for it. The reason this is my tool of the week is because not just with COVID, but with any airborne spread illness, CO2 acts as a proxy. So if the CO2 levels are higher, that is in proxy. It means that the virus or a virus in that environment may be higher as well. And so outside we deal with around 400 parts per million. And the AirNet 4 is a fairly inexpensive way for a camp facility to be able to carry it building to building and see how safe that is inside of buildings, and see also the air exchange in a building, right? So at our farmhouse office here at Pierce Williams, it consistently reads somewhere around 650 to 690, which is great, amazing level. In my camp director's house, which is a tighter build and a newer build, it consistently reads around 1200 parts per million, which is still fine because there's only 2 of us in the house. There's also something about CO2 where if you're in an environment where it's higher, you become more lethargic. So above 1000, you start getting, so the less CO2 in an environment, the better. And outside is 400. So I've had it for about a week now. I've had another one for a couple of weeks, and I just returned it to Amazon because it was off. The cheaper ones were off in their accounting. So I'll take this on a plane, and anything above 1500, I'll wear a mask. Am I going to a conference? Anything above 1500, I'll put a mask on.
That is so cool and crazy and sci-fi-ish, and I'm into
something
it.
I never would have thought about.
No,
There is
how did you do that?
Yeah.
There's a Canadian doctor and scientist on TikTok who has been doing these tests, and I was just like, that seems like an inexpensive way for us who have 18 buildings to walk into a building, leave it there. So in an empty building, see what it is. So then you have a baseline for each of those buildings, and then in a full building. Because we've also, here at Pierce Williams, we've increased our MERV rating on furnace filters because we're winterized. A MERV rating is how small a particles the furnace will filter out of the air. And to catch something like COVID, you need a MERV 13. But it also means that it's going to fill with things like hair and dust and other things much faster. So you need to make sure you change it or else it'll hurt your furnace. So these are things I think about in a winterized facility for sure. So the AirNet is a $350. Sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But for your camp, I think it's worth it.
That's awesome.
That's great.
I should say that the follow-up to that is that Joe and I obviously follow a lot of the same people on TikTok, is that the solution to reduce the risk is fairly simple. When you know that there's a problem, simply turning on a fan and opening a window a crack can change the atmosphere in no problem, and just instantly reduces the risk of passing diseases, virus-based diseases from person to person, with the simple act of turning on a bathroom fan or a kitchen fan and just providing a crack of air. It's been really interesting to watch some of the self-education that's happened about disease transmission, but also the solutions, which I'll make that a tool of the week later. I've got another one. So, Gab, what's your tool of the week?
We're going over to the high-tech world of gnomes. So if you want
Did you
to
say
do craft with your kids, I
gnomes?
did say gnomes, Chris.
Okay,
I
cool.
did say
I'm
gnomes.
keeping notes. So
Thank you. Thank you. If you want a craft that looks good at your camp and you can use scraps of material that's been piling up, gnomes is the way for you. I've linked a video. There's 100 different ways that you can make gnomes on Pinterest, YouTube, the good old internet. We did it this fall with one of our reunions with our younger family members, and the gnomes that came out of that were adorable, hilarious, and all looked really, really good. And just puts, your one staff member that's crafty. You don't have to know how to do it. You don't have to know how to do it. You can just get them. Chris, it was funny. Just give me the laugh, okay?
I didn't know we were coming for puns, but I'm here for it.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wince so publicly.
I saw the eye roll, but I'm still owning it. But yeah, get your craft person. They'll know what to do, and it's one of those crafts that will just look good and it's cute, and you can use scraps of material that you have at camp.
Thank you, Gabz.
This is also a reason to have lost and found socks not be garbage.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because in our
I might fight you
world,
on that today too. 2 issues today, Joe. I might fight you on.
what? No, you wash
Socks
them
and
and then you
underwear
make
straight in the garbage. Never on
underwear.
the lost and
Yes,
found
but
tree.
socks, if they can become cute gnomes.
Fair point. Fair point. I would, of course, do that other TikTok phenomenon, which is clothing stripping, and to those socks before I would be willing to use them in any crafts with other people's kids. Chris.
Oh, it's my turn. So it has been a long summer, and it's been a challenging, as you heard before, it's been a challenging summer for me professionally. It's been a challenging year for me personally. And it's funny how things just kind of line up in your life. I was staying after camp. I went away for a week because I absolutely needed to. And even the vacation was a hard time. And it just happened to be that in the drawer of the hotel that I was staying at, someone had left a book. And I swiped it because I was like, free book. Yeah. And it's this book.
It's a Bible. You have to put that back.
It wasn't a Bible. It's funny. It's called You Are Here, Discovering the Magic of the Present Moment by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk who writes and talks, and everybody who is even vaguely aware of Buddhism is aware of who he is. And I didn't know. I'd seen some of his videos on YouTube. I didn't connect it was the same person until I started reading. I would just listen. I don't know where you are in your life, listener. I don't know what you're dealing with, but this book can help you only because it's just about how to situate yourself in your current moment, how to be grateful of the things that you have. If you are someone like me who has regrets from the past and worries about the future, like finding a way to stay in the present it's a challenge, but it's completely worthwhile. It's a lot of thinking about breath and attention. And if it sounds like out there for you, I don't care. I think you should try it anyway. It's called You Are Here, and you should check it out. It's a really easy read. And even after the first chapter, I was like, wow, this just makes so much sense. So my challenge to anyone listening to this is like, you know what? Just read the first chapter. And if you hate it, stop. But I think if you just read only the first chapter, you're going to get something out of it, because it really has helped me through the past couple of months. So that's my gift to you.
Thank you so much. My tool of the week is a new app and website called NotePD, obviously just short for Notepad, notepd.com. And it's a really interesting site for generating ideas of things and developing the practice of pushing yourself to generate more ideas. So there's a writer, a podcaster named James Altucher, and he was involved in some big TV stuff and kind of lost his whole business, and everything kind of had to start over again. He is the founder of this app because he got himself out of the funk of losing everything by taking a restaurant notepad, like a waiter's notepad from a restaurant supply store, and making himself write down 10 ideas a day. They didn't have to be linked. They could be just that practice is how he got himself out of that funk and is back, from my perception, making lots of money and very happy living his life in New York City. But he continues to practice. And I read him talk about this. I've heard him say it on podcasts. But I just found out that they now have an app for it. And if you go to the show notes at camphacker.tv/podcast, you'll find the links there. My link there. It's free. There are some paid features, but I haven't even seen a need for the paid features, but there are cues. If you're stuck for what do I want to generate ideas about, then there are some cues to do that. I think it's just a great idea to practice the idea of generating new ideas all the time. And if you wish, again, camphacker.tv/podcast, this is episode 171. You can find the link there to a challenge that I've created for camp people related to today's themes. So there's a challenge called Things That the Summer Camp Industry Needs to Consider for a Sustainable Future. And you go there. It doesn't have to be 10 ideas. That's just sort of his model. But you can connect to that again from where the podcast hosts and show notes are. You can see that challenge, and I invite anybody to be a part of that. And I just created the challenge this morning. It was easy to do so. I haven't even started my list on there. I will do so, but it's been fun on some things it's been fun to get involved in challenges, and I have created a couple of other challenges around how to make cities and towns nicer to live in, that have been picked up and been really interesting to read people's ideas. So Notepad, NotePD. So that brings us to the end of the show. Again, I've said over and over again where you find the episode stuff. I would like to spend a moment and highlight another Go Camp Pro show that I think is important and useful to you. Please check out First Class Counselors. It is a show for you as the camp director to pass on to your staff. It is a way for seasonal staff to have year-round training and ideas generated by some great Go Camp Pro podcasters that will help them get ready for the summer, help them develop some mindset stuff around summer camp. And it's great because some of it's really small, like how you put campers to bed, and some of it's bigger picture, like how do we develop our own stamina for the summer when we're a seasonal staff member. So please check that out at First Class Counselors. You can search for that in your podcast apps. Thank you to the three of you for joining us and for, again, sharing all of your great things. It's great to be back in the podcast saddle with all of you. If you want to get a hold of Joe, Gabz, or Chris, you can go to camphacker.tv/podcast. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening, and thanks for the evening, friends.